So today we'll continue our discussion about the empires of Asia. And in chapter 8, section 1, we are talking about the dynasties of China. And so we continue our dynasties discussion. Our first lesson in this section is about the Sui dynasty that united China after many years of civil war after its collapse under the Han dynasty. And then in the lesson before this is about the spread of Buddhism, and we also learn about the other two major religions in China, which is Taoism or Taoism and Confucianism. In this lesson, we'll learn about two dynasties, which is the Tang and the Song dynasties. Okay, so go to Loda USD website or get your textbooks and log into Clever, and from Clever, Cengage Learning. And from Cengage Learning, log in with your student account and password, which is our National Geographic Learning resource. And from the left side, it should be Unit 4, Empires of Asia, and Chapter 8. And we are in Section 1, and we are doing Lesson 3, Tang and Song Dynasty, pages 216 to 217. This chapter's essential question is, what legacy did China leave to the modern world? And the objective of this lesson, Lesson 3, is to identify ways in which China grew and prospered under the Tang and Song dynasties. So as a summary, during this era, the Chinese created great art and literature. So in this lesson, it describes how China flourished under the Tang and Song dynasties. The Sui dynasty started it all. So they are the ones who provided a solid foundations of government for future dynasties to build on. So the rulers of the Tang dynasty seized power in 618, and they continued the project of reunifying China, which had begun under the short-lived Sui dynasty. So there is economic growth in agriculture and other areas like trade, and in the government in general. So the dynasty also strengthened the government by using civil service examinations to select government officials. What is the meaning of this? So before, officials are just related to whoever is in charge or who's in power. But because of this civil service system, those who are serving the government are truly qualified individuals who are competent enough to run the government. So in other words, only those who are well-educated scholars can become officials of the government who will create policy, which is obviously should be the case for every government. So they help keep the government stable from one emperor to the next. So these reforms helped the Tang expand the empire into Central and South Asia, which is something that you can see in lesson 1.1. Now, this is the pattern for every civilization, successful civilization. Literature and art flourish because people have enough resources to do these extra things. So, unfortunately, few paintings survive, but beautiful sculptures reveal the talent of the artists of this period. Also, around 48,000 poems exist from this time. So, Tang officials were encouraged to write poetry. It was, in some sense, a pop culture during this time. Taizong was the second Tang emperor and an admired figure in Chinese history. So from 629 to 649, 20 years, he used Confucian ideas to organize his government. Later, Hu Zhao, the wife of Taizong's son and successor Gaozong, became China's only official female emperor by ruthlessly eliminating her rivals, including her own children. Now, despite the stormy succession, Hu Zhao had inherited a peaceful and well-run country. So her policies were sensible, improved the life of the people, and it helped strengthen the empire in general. So later, Tang emperors were less successful. Political instability sparked a long civil war in which millions died. Poor rulers, corruption, and rebellion weakened Tang authority until the dynasty lost power in 907. Once again, China plunged into chaos. Now, let's talk about the Song dynasty. So, in 1960, over 50 years later, the Song dynasty restored order. Though the Song rulers did not expand the territory of the empire, they introduced domestic improvements or improvements from within the empire that made Song China the world's most advanced society of the time. From Buddhism, Confucianism again became the state philosophy. So art and literature thrived while technology led to new inventions. Agriculture expanded with new techniques in drainage and irrigation and also terrace farming. So strains of rice from Southeast Asia doubled the harvest, and rice became China's staple. It means that is the basic food that you will find in every table. So from 750 to 1100, China's population doubled to 100 million. That's a lot. That was like 1,000 years ago, and they are 100 million. So meanwhile, this growth led to more rapid trade, and China's economy boomed. Farmers grew sugarcane, tea, bamboo, and hemp for trade, and traditional crafts of silk, paper, and ceramics grew in popularity as well. So, improved roads and canals carried goods within China, while bigger ships carried exports overseas. For the first time, the state made more money from trade than from agriculture. Well, because of its strong economy, China started banks and printed the world's first paper money. Of course, this prosperity led to the growth of cities, which became busy centers of culture and commerce, or the buying and selling of goods. Now let's listen to Angela Yao about her research regarding the histories of Chinese
Today with
cities.
Dr. Angela Yao of the University of Georgia, a National Geographic grantee and geographer who looks at cities. In particular, she looks at the use of computers for modeling cities and the use of space. And in particular, she specializes in cities in China. So we've asked her to join us today to tell us a little bit about her work. So, Angela, give us a little idea. What are you interested in? What do you study?
Actually, I'm looking at the growth of a city, almost like a human being. Cities started at some point small and grow bigger, and there are different components, almost like organs, in the city transportation system and other residential area, commercial areas. So, one, I want to look at the spatial distribution of these components in a city, and also I want to watch the growth of different components within a city.
What made you want to be a geographer?
I have always been fascinated by maps. Maps. When I was a child, I just loved geometry. I love maps because I like to think graphically. So that's one part of it. When we are thinking about what we want to study, well, very often we either study the nature environment, we study human beings, people's activities, but all of that have locations. So we are always interested in the locations of different events or different phenomena, and they can be represented on a map. So all of that, I think, is just fascinating. So that's why I think this is a good profession for me to pursue.
Tell us a little bit about your work in China.
I want to, as I said before, I'm interested in the growth of cities. So I got some historical maps of Beijing. I tried to find the locations, the area, the boundaries of Beijing in history, in different dynasties, and then most importantly in current years, in the past maybe 10 or 20 years, and try to see how it grow and how different components of Beijing grow. It really expanded too much right now. There are a lot of problems with the growth as well. So that's my research. I try to collect all the historical data and also study the growth of it and try to predict, and this is my current ongoing project, try to predict the future pattern as well.
Can you give us a little idea of the sort of history of Chinese cities? So we think of Chinese cities today like Shanghai and Beijing as these enormous cities with millions and millions of people in them. Is there a historical precedent for that?
Historian probably will try to put the history of Chinese cities in maybe 3 or 4 different areas or era. The earliest one is really kind of 3,000 or 4,000 years old. But then there is a medieval period, a middle period, and there is a late imperial period starting probably in Ming Dynasty, Ming and Qing Dynasty. And then the most recent, maybe 50 or 60 years, we started in the Republican era after the Second World War and the establishment of the new Republican China. And so you will see the transition from the pre-modern urban forms towards the modern cities in the recent maybe 50, 60 years. So that's Beijing. It started really early in different dynasties, and it has a very long history. Shanghai, in comparison, probably is slightly different. Started as a village much later than Beijing. It has never been a capital in history, but it really probably influenced a lot by, how do I say, the interaction with the rest of the world. So you will see a lot of architecture, different styles, influenced by European and maybe American as well. So Shanghai has a pretty interesting history, quite different from Beijing. So you see different types of cities and different types of histories of the cities.
I was recently in China, in Shanghai and Beijing, and I remember thinking Shanghai is a very international city and Beijing is a very Chinese city.
Yeah, lots of Western influence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Angela, can you tell us a little bit about the difference as a geographer between American cities and Chinese cities? What do you see as a geographer that's so different between them, or are they the same?
Also, I really want to compare the differences. They are, of course, there are some similarities. Small, well, usually the big cities started small for a reason. Maybe it's close to a river, something that's suitable for a settlement for people to live. In the Western urban development history probably will tell you a lot of histories about city, and very often the urban form is concentric. When the transportation is not as easy, there is a small center, and people will try to really cluster around the center. So there will be residential area, there will be industrial area. So you have the concentric rings. But these theories can explain the growth and development and growth of cities, of many different cities in Europe, in America, in the United States very well, but not all of them. Not all the theories or theories about urban form and urban development can explain Chinese cities very well. Well, I'm not saying none of them can explain anything. They can explain some part of it, but there are always other things. There are a lot of influence from the different regime, different political system. So it's it's centralized, the power and everything is centralized. The central government can tell how the city can grow. They can decide, for example, the development of Beijing, probably there is huge investment from the central government directly. There's no, it's not easy to stop it if you have kind of the national investment to the city.
If you didn't, what other job would you like to try, or if you hadn't become a geographer?
Yeah, I really love to try a lot of different things. I like geometry, which is part of mathematics. I love math in general, so I would love to be a computer scientist, actually. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a computer scientist. But I'm doing really something very similar, studying the cities in computer systems. I love music, although I'm not a musician. I just love listening to good music, photographer. I love traveling, so I think there are a lot of very fun things to try out.
Angela, what makes you curious?
But just collectively, human beings, as kind of one thing, the singular form, human beings, they're just fascinating. Right now, we started from something that's really principled, but now we move to the age. Now it's the digital age, information technology. We are doing a lot of things that our ancestors never thought about. So I'm just keep thinking, what's next? After now, what's next? Yeah. Well, what are we up to? Can we do something that's more fascinating? So, human beings make me curious. Minds make me curious.
That's great. Angela, why should we study world history?
I really love history because everyone can benefit from it. I at my leisure time, if I don't have a lot of leisure time, but if I do, I actually love reading history books. The best part is that it's not fiction; it's real stories. It's something happened in the past in history. It's trustworthy and exciting. So that's fun part of it.
What does it mean to you to be a global citizen or a citizen of the world?
Really, learning history really influences our relationship to the world. If we know the world we can be a better citizen because we know better how to interact with it. For the world, the physical environment, and also human beings, people in under different culture, different ethnicity. So we know how to interact with them better. So knowing more about it, about the world and different parts of the world, just help us to be a better citizen.
Okay, now it's time for us to answer the review and assess questions. For number one, reading check. How did China change during the Song Dynasty? Number two, make inferences. How did reforms introduced under the Tang Dynasty contribute to China's golden age? And number three, analyze cause and effect. How did the growth of trade during the Song Dynasty affect China? Okay, go back to our Google Classroom and open the review and assess assignment and put those answers to those review and assess questions in lesson 3. And don't forget to fill up the basic information and the key vocab, commerce. And of course, to get a full credit with the correct answers, complete sentences using your own words. So that's our lesson for today.